Welcome to the Driver's Line. I'm Greg.
And I'm Jordan.
And today, we have a conversation for you.
Yeah, our conversation really is a fun one today because we're going to be looking at cars that overall are a pretty good package, but they were let down by their engine.
Yeah. So we're going to look at for cars that had a really good chassis, really cool design, very stylistic maybe, fun shifting transmissions, things of that nature. But for whatever reason, they put a boat anchor under the hood.
Yeah, so this is going to be a pretty odd list, honestly. I think we're going to be all over the place, which is fun. We each have 4 picks for you.
Yep.
And we're just going to kick it off here.
That's right. So you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm going to start with one. Actually, this is going to be a controversial pick.
There's no controversial picks.
Well, I know that this car is almost universally hated, and I'm going to be honest with you, I have a soft spot for it. And it's not the Pontiac Aztek. And before we go there,
What van are we talking about today?
No, it's not that. All right, so in the early noughts, right, GM was looking at ways to kind of spice up their lineups, and they decided, let's get GM Performance Division up and running, and let's just build a performance everything. Mm-hmm. And now this sounds kind of contrary to what the point of this podcast is, right? Because we're saying terrible engines.
Terrible engines kind of ring opposite of performance.
Yeah,
generally.
Now, one would think that a small block Chevy is not a bad engine. Mm-hmm. It's not, right?
No, great engine.
Great engine.
One of the best engines of all time, frankly.
True, yeah. But then you consider what it's going into, right?
Okay.
If we're talking about a standout performance-meant vehicle, I'm going to be honest with you, the 5.3 is probably not the one I'd go with. We have a lineup of other LS series engines in the GM stable that really are dedicated towards performance, right? That we could rip out of a Corvette, out of a Camaro, that type of thing. So back in 03,
I know what we're talking about.
what we're talking about. All right. GM said, let's take our Trailblazer chassis and let's put a super cool body on it.
Yep.
That's a convertible and a pickup.
A convertible pickup. Everybody wants one of those.
Now, admittedly, this is a very narrow market segment.
It's extremely narrow. It's like the narrowest market segment in the world.
I know. But, the whole point of it was to draw people to it, to be awed and amazed as a halo car basically for their pickup lineup, right?
Yeah.
So, when you have other pickups in your stable that are powered by 6-liter V8s,
yeah,
and you put a 5.3 in your performance SSR, things get a little bit kind of blah, especially when you pair it with a 4-speed automatic, right?
Yeah.
So
this seemed like a theme for the automotive industry at this time, right? Yeah. The Prowler had just come out, a few years earlier, and you had this really cool roadster, hot rod body, and they're like, in Dodge's infinite, Chrysler's infinite wisdom, they're like, what should we put under the hood? We're going to do a 3.5-liter V6 and a 5-speed auto stick. Yay! It's just so bad. The worst choice in the world. And maybe it was fitment issues there, but we don't have that here with the SSR.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty well built vehicle. Other than this engine really hampered at launch, and the reviews all stated that when it came out, which really brings down the image of this car.
Yeah.
If you're building a halo vehicle, you're talking about pinnacle, right?
And this thing weighed a lot too, right?
It did.
It was
over
5,000 pounds.
5,000 pounds. Yeah.
And so you need some horsepower to move 5,000 pounds.
When you're saying a performance pinnacle as a pickup does 0 to 60 in almost 8 seconds, something's wrong. I mean, So, like I said, 5.3, not inherently a bad engine, but in this application, it's not really in the right place. And GM saw that. To be honest, they did see that. They ran that engine for 2 years. In 05, they dropped in that 6-liter V8.
LS2, baby.
Let's start with the LS2, right. Bumped up the horsepower by almost 100 horsepower. Dropped that 0 to 60 down to 5.3 seconds, which is definitely much closer where it should be, considering the price and considering where it was in the lineup.
It boggles my mind that they didn't put the LS1 in there to start with, right? Because I know the LS2 didn't come around until 05, 06, right? But, I mean, it's ridiculous when your General Motors, you have all these great engines sitting everywhere. 5.3. Boop.
Yeah. I mean, GM does not want to step on the Corvette's toes, which I get that, but you're talking about a 5,000 pound
truck never would.
Right.
Never would.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about it. Heart of a Corvette.
Yeah.
That's what people want to hear when they go to Chevy.
Maybe the marketing, and then you could buy that and then tow your Corvette with it.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah.
I feel like we know someone who does that, actually.
We actually do.
And he loves his SSR.
He does. Yeah. It's a great, I mean, it's a great tow vehicle.
Fun tow vehicle, yeah.
So, all right. So, since you started off with small block Chevy, I feel like I'm going to have to continue along with a really bad small block Chevy.
Oh, no.
So, back in the 80s, GM kind of saw, like fuel was being a big issue, cost of fuel. So they're like, hey, they saw Europeans, having some success with diesel. So they're like, why don't we make a diesel too? And so this never went a particularly good car, but the engine is so bad that I want to talk about it. The cars were great for their time, right? Like, I mean, they were fine, just, commuter type vehicles and things of that nature. But I'm, of course, talking about the Oldsmobile 5.7 liter diesel.
Oof.
And so GM, in their infinite wisdom, took their existing 350, the gasoline version, mind you, and we're like, we're going to take this exact engine and convert it to diesel.
Okay. How do I do that?
It doesn't work.
Simple, right?
No, it literally does not work. Like, I mean, this engine had so many shortcomings within it. It was well, I mean, first off, it was like crude and slow. It was
Unreliable, for sure.
Just everything that you don't want in an engine was what it was. And if you ever tried to floor it, all you did was make more noise and more smoke.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly efficient either.
It was not efficient. It wasn't fast. It was, I mean, absolutely nothing redeeming about this engine. It had cooling issues. It had, what else did it have? It had a weak block and head design. I mean, it was so bad, like in every way, shape, and form, that it single-handedly set back the perceptions of diesels in the United States.
I mean, it's definitely like a big example of GM cost cutting at its worst.
Yes.
And trying to catch up with market placement. But when a fuel efficient 5.7 liter diesel, come on, guys, let's think about this for a second.
And if you're actually going to design a diesel, maybe just start with a clean sheet of paper. Yeah. Like, come on. Especially
for a company like GM that has such global outreach too at the time.
Right. They could have put that in other cars and some of the brands they owned overseas, like Opel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
We could have had a decent diesel in the 80s from GM, but they chose to do that.
That's true. Pity.
It's
a pity. Well, I hate to beat up on GM, but it seems this is a theme.
They're not going to let us come to their booth at the New York Auto Show next month.
Thankfully, their more modern products are a bit better in this regard. But sticking around the same era, fuel crisis, right? So we had the fantastic Pontiac division, as you know, performance bred for GM, and the folks at GM internally wanted to create another sports car, right? And famously, the Fiero is the car I'm talking about. I think we can get that out of the way. I think everyone knows we're going down this road. So as they're kind of evaluating building this, they were like, okay, we're going to put a V6 in this thing. It's going to be mid-engine. It's going to be super light. And the bigwigs were like, we can't do that. We can't compete with the Corvette.
That's right. Because they knew it would be more dynamic than the Corvette. They didn't want to come anywhere close to the horsepower numbers. I mean, frankly, back in the 80s, the Corvette wasn't making a ton of power.
It's true. So they were like, okay, well, how can we make this, but make it applicable to the market without stepping on the Corvette's toes, right? So it has this nice streamlined body. Maybe if we put a fuel-efficient engine in it, we can sell it as a really fuel-efficient commuter car.
There you go.
Because I know in a commuter car, I want no trunk space.
That's right. Totally. Makes sense. Perfect sense. My daily car, I want it to be
really cramped.
Really cramped, but handle brilliantly.
Right. Yes. Going around those city blocks.
That's right.
Okay. So obviously, at the time, Pontiac said, we're going to be dropping in the famously fuel-efficient, which it was, to be fair.
It was.
The 2.5 liter Iron Duke, also found in our USPS Postal Service trucks.
So, USPS Postal Service vehicle, Pontiac Fiero.
Same heart. So, I mean, overall, the engine wasn't that bad, and because of its, fuel efficiency. I mean, they were like 50 miles a gallon at the time.
I mean, they had massive fuel efficiency, and they were also unkillable.
They were, clearly, because they're still running.
They're literally running in these little trucks that are still running around that the Postal Service still has not gotten rid of.
Exactly. So this is another situation where the engine itself, I mean, certainly was not the most powerful, the most exciting, but a decent one for the time, but not to what the car should have been.
That's
it
right.
did not match the standard.
Yeah.
Again, GM realized this, right? Later on, dropped in a 2.8 liter V6, upped the power, but you know, that additional 50 horsepower was too late.
Yeah,
too little,
absolutely.
too late. And they were looking at a second-gen Fiero, but never came to be because the sales numbers just weren't there, and because we just hampered that launch. Had we come out with maybe started with a more powerful V6 and then introduced a more fuel-efficient one after we've already set the image for the car, maybe that could have been an option. But yeah, poor Fiero.
That's why the folks in the aftermarket are like, oh, we can shove a North Star in there.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Just open it up and
There's space.
yeah, put it on in. But yeah, no, it's a shame that the Fieros were definitely hampered by a.
It would have been a
poor
really cool
choice.
car to see evolve over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pour one out for Pontiac.
There we go. We miss you.
Driving excitement. Anyways, all right, so
Especially the Aztec. I'm kidding.
one person misses the Aztec. Anyways, you and Walter White. Anyways,
It's not on this list.
science teachers. But anyways, one of the next ones we're going to talk about, I used to own.
Oh, this is coming close to home.
Yeah,
Okay.
hitting very, very close to home. And
Okay.
so I am talking about the Subaru BRZ, the first generation.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah.
Scion FRS, Subaru BRZ, really cool design, right? Like, I mean, the whole 86 design looked great.
Sure.
Fantastic chassis.
And it still does.
Handle, yeah, I mean, it still looks great to this day.
Yeah.
Still, handles extremely well. Had a really nice slick shifting 6-speed manual in there. But they decided they were going to use the FA20, 2-liter boxer 4-cylinder with 200 horsepower. I think it was about 156 pound-feet of torque. Not a great engine. It's not a great engine. It was very, very thrashy. It sounded like a tractor.
Right.
A lot of people kind of said it was very agricultural in nature, and famously had what everybody knows as the torque dip. So it had a decent torque down low, then none. And then when you were ringing it out, it had, again, kind of went back into power. And it just made it okay to drive when you're thrashing it about, but when you're just, kind of driving around like a normal vehicle, that's kind of where you live, is that normal mid-range torque band. And the car just felt lifeless at those places, and it was just such a poor decision, especially when you're either Subaru or Toyota. You could have, I know that the ethos of the car wanted the boxer engine, right, because of the low flat HUD and lower center of gravity, but you still could have went with a Toyota 4-cylinder. Something kind of like the 2ZZ, maybe like a further evolution of that was in the Celica GTS, which would have been a great revvy fun engine. Or you could have gone with the WRX engine out of the Subaru if you really wanted to make that happen. You would have had to reconfigure where the turbo is and where the intercooler is, but you're a major manufacturer, you can do this.
Yeah, so even provide it as an option for people who really want that performance.
Right, and so, I mean, they got it a lot more right with the second generation. It's got the 2.4 liter in there now, up to about 230 horsepower. So
it's on our recommended list, by the way.
It is. And so, again, just a curious decision, because you've got, the revvy fun cars that are sort of, it's slightly earlier periods with like the S2000, had a wonderful engine in it.
Oh, yeah.
Miata, less power, but, a fun revvy engine. It just didn't make a lot of sense when they did it. You could rectify that with, a header and a tune, but should you have to?
No, you shouldn't, considering the manufacturer. I mean, they have a long history of being able to modify their own 4-cylinder engines, and that's really a shame, considering that chassis is just
the chassis is so good.
Yeah.
So good. And the design was fun, and the car was priced right.
Yeah.
The one thing really kind of held it back from being like more of an icon, I feel like.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I still see like a lot of young folks going towards those cars because they're so affordable. They have the right look.
They do.
And they have a great name brand behind them. They know they're going to be reliable.
Yeah.
So we could just up the performance a little bit, even as an option, even as a turd option.
Yeah. Even as a turd option or an STI.
Yeah. Ooh, bringing it back to
we'll drop that link up there.
Yeah.
So anyways.
bringing it back to our poorly named performance divisions, but yeah, this one's shared.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's a great call out. I mean, that definitely deserved more power right out the gate, but thankfully they've done something to fix that for the second gen. Let's hope that continues. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to take a break from GM. In a sense. There's still some GM-related stuff in this next one. I'm sorry. But it is just a person that worked for GM, so.
Oh, a person's a bad engine.
a person by the name of John DeLorean. Yeah, so as we know, John was an interesting guy, right? He had lots of crazy ideas, and some of them really helped GM out.
Yeah,
honestly.
some of them landed him in jail, but that's fine.
Yes. This one maybe should have landed him in jail earlier, if I'm honest with you. And we're clearly talking about the DMC-12.
Yes.
All right. And this was a pretty revolutionary car at the time, right? We're talking about going doors, stainless steel body, mid-engine at the time was supposed to be the design that kind of shifted more towards a rear engine design as it was launched. But this really was so strikingly different from so many cars at the time, right? And it deserved a powertrain that was equally different. And at the time, they were thinking about putting a rotary Wankel engine in there. That would have been fantastic. I mean, in a sense, if they could actually get one to work properly, that's the other gamut. I'm sure that's kind of why they were like,
We're going to talk about bad rotary engines here in a second.
But nonetheless, a cool forced induction, maybe rotary engine would have been a really nice centerpiece of that car.
Maybe, but why not a French V6?
Well, let's talk about why not. How does 130 horsepower sound in a car that's made entirely of stainless steel?
Not great?
Yeah, it's was not great. Okay, it's 0 to 60 times were comparable to that of like a family sedan essentially of the time. So
you're in your beautiful stainless steel going door bodied, almost custom built car.
Yeah, I mean truly.
And you can't accelerate, Jordan in his Chrysler minivan that's next to you because he chose the little turbo option, right?
That's right, yeah, with manual.
He actually probably smoke you.
Probably. Let's do it. Let's set it up.
Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
You're in a DeLorean and you get wiped by a Caravan.
Yes. Oh. So it's just the car was not cheap at the time, right? And you're putting an engine in from a Volvo or Peugeot or a Renault, and these are not things that are cheap to maintain, stateside, obviously. And it doesn't have any other, what is the reason for this? There's no performance. It's not fuel efficient. Wow. So, this, it really, obviously, other than the John DeLorean related crises, this really hampered the DMC-12 from really reaching where it could have been.
Yeah.
Other than, the Back to the Future movie that kind of launched it into popularity, it would have really faltered even more.
I know, gosh, just think how much, Marty McFly and Doc, needed a tailwind to get that thing to 88 miles an hour.
So, yeah, I mean, they look cool, but they are very disappointing to drive, and that's why I selected it for Greg's scary Halloween list, which we can link for you, too, so you can see all the scary choices.
I still would rather have that than the BMW i8 I gave you for your scary supercar.
That was a finalist for me, I'm not going to lie. But
anyways, all right. It was a great choice. And, it's the rotary tie-in. It's funny because my next choice actually has a rotary engine.
Oh, look at that.
And so I'm going to pick on Mazda here for my next two choices.
I almost picked this one.
And so you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the RX-8.
Yes.
So RX-8, kind of ushered in some of that new design language for Mazda that we saw in the NC Miata as well. And so they also were we're going to, kind of continue this ethos that we had with RX-7, but we're going to go ahead and just take those turbos off the rotaries because we don't need them anymore. A rotary's fine without turbos. It doesn't need them.
Plenty of power.
And so they somehow managed to eke 232 horsepower out of this thing, which isn't bad.
Yeah.
But it had 152 pound-feet of torque. And again, RX-8 had a great body. It was a really nice looking car, I thought, at the time.
I think so.
It was kind of unique with the suicide doors, right? And, 4 people seating and, still relatively lightweight because Mazda's great at doing that, but horribly inefficient engine. Very, very inefficient from a fueling standpoint. Typical rotary like to use oil.
Right.
And just wasn't one of the most reliable engines Mazda's ever made. It just... While it was the centerpiece of the car, it had little triangle rotaries everywhere within the design language of the car. Yes. On the rear diffuser, on the front, on the nose, the stack on the inside of the car all had that little rotary on the seats, right? I mean, it was literally everywhere within the car. So it was the center point of this car, and it was a letdown.
It really was. I mean, considering how the whole point behind Mazdas is that driver engagement. When you give a car no torque, that's not fun to drive.
It's not fun to drive, especially when its predecessor was the FD-RX-7, which came with a twin turbo rotary that made a lot more power than this.
Yes, and that is why I selected it as one of our biggest failures of a refresh.
Yeah. But absolutely. I mean, that was a great call then, and it still makes sense now.
Such a shame, because it was a cool looking car, but it was a very definitely didn't live up to its name.
Yeah. And especially, when you got like they even made like an R3 version, right? That had like all the suspension and, aero and stuff on it, and
just matched that engine's not. Yeah.
It was very, very smooth. I actually enjoyed driving these. I've driven them in the past, and very, very smooth. And it revs smoothly and cleanly and all that kind of fun stuff, but I want to go somewhere too.
Right, just making a lot of noise for no reason. Yeah, that's a shame. Good call out. Good pick. Well, for my last one, I'm going back to GM. I can't. I don't know. Okay, so for this one, this is a weird one for me because I think the engine itself maybe isn't that bad. Okay. I think it's pretty cool and unique, actually. But again, when you're looking at it as a packaging point of view, in comparison with other vehicles in the lineup, it was a pretty big letdown.
Yeah.
All right. And what I'm talking about is the Cadillac XLR-V. It had the supercharged 4.4 liter Northstar V8, which put out a nice amount of power.
Yeah.
Okay. We're talking over 440 horsepower. And it's designed to really compete with the Europeans. So I get why they made that choice. Dual overhead cams, supercharged. It's very much in a German performance ethos, okay? But there was another car in the GM lineup that let me just make sure the price is right here, because I looked at this and I was like, this cannot be serious. Literally within $800 of each other, okay? For $800 more, you could have gotten 200 more horsepower in the car with interior materials. Honestly, they're pretty comparable to the XLR, and I'm talking about the Corvette ZR1 Blue Devil. Okay, this was a legendary car at the time when it came out, made history. And its engine itself is fantastic.
Oh, I mean, the car to this day is still a masterpiece.
Oh my gosh!
It's one of the best things GM has ever done.
Incredible, 638 horsepower versus 440. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So who's going to buy that XLR-V?
So again, I think I appreciate where you're coming with this, but I'm going to disagree.
Ooh, okay.
So we're coming in hot here.
I like it.
I think they were never meant to compete for buyers.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's fair.
Someone that wants an XLR-V is going to be someone that was like cross-shopping with the SL55.
And what's the type of consumer that shops those, just for the reader, or viewer that knows? Yeah.
So he's going to try to dunk on me here.
Go ahead.
It's older white men.
And what type of person buys Corvettes exactly?
Young guys.
But to be fair, I do see your point. I mean, like, Corvettes are not luxury cars.
Yes, it is the same.
I get that.
Like, demographic, right? The demographic is the same, but is the same person who wants different things, right? Like, I mean, you're going to want your Blue Devil for your weekend fun car, but you're going to want your SL55 for an everyday car.
That's fair.
I mean, that's what it's going to be, and that's what they want the XLR-V to be. I mean, from a shopping standpoint, for people like us, we both would totally choose the ZR1.
Yeah.
Like, hands down.
For sure.
Like, it wouldn't even I wouldn't even hesitate. So, I mean, but, that's not us, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, someone who's shopping that is different. And to your point, people, Cadillac wanted to make an engine that was technologically interesting.
And very reliable.
The Germans weren't reliable, so Cadillac wanted to be the same. Right? They wanted to be unreliable,
Makes
too.
sense.
You got to come to our service centers to enjoy this fine engineering, right?
Yes.
But I mean, that's it's kind of the same thing they did in my ATSV, right? Like they're, instead of like, we all know the LS3 fits, right? Sure. They could have easily put that in, but they chose to put in a twin turbo V6 because they wanted to be more German.
Gotcha. No, I get that. So, I do get that.
Yeah.
I guess part of me really wanted them to produce something like the CN.
Right.
And really, like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure inside GM to not bust past the Corvette.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you're gonna launch a Cadillac performance brand, then launch a Cadillac performance brand and go for it. Make the car twice the cost of a Corvette.
Yeah.
Okay, and make a statement, but put an engine in there that matches that. So I just feel like they were just so close, really, in market segment.
They were.
And I do get that point that they are somewhat different in terms of their placement.
Use case,
but I don't know. They should have like swung for the fences.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they could have done so much more with it, right? But I see where you're coming from, but I understand what Cadillac did too at the same time.
Yeah,
so
I get that.
It is what it is. So good choice, but bad choice. So my next choice is probably also going to be a little, people might have opinions on it.
Okay, all right.
So
let's see.
We'll see what you think about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about another Mazda. I kind of mentioned that a moment ago, so we're going to go back to Mazda, beat on them a little bit more, and I'm going to specifically talk about the Miata.
But you can't talk bad about the Miata.
I can.
No,
I am.
You can't.
That's why I'm leaning in.
Oh no.
That and to get the sun out of my face. So. Yes. The Miata.
Do tell.
Everybody loves it. So hold on to your pitchforks for just a moment, because I'm talking about one submodel of the Miata.
Ooh. Okay.
And I'm talking about the NB Mazda Speed Miata.
Ah.
So it came with a 1.8 liter turbo.
Yes.
And so this is when Mazda actually was, kind of trying to do some fun initial stuff with their Mazda Speed brand. We had the Mazda Speed 3, great car. Yep. Mazda Speed 6, great car. Mazda Speed Miata, great try.
Okay. And why do you feel this way?
Largely, it just came down to, well, two things with the Mazda Speed Miata. We're talking about engines here, so I'm not going to really get into the other things, but the wheels were too big. Didn't make a lot of sense on there. So with these big, honking boat anchor 17-inch Racing Heart wheels. But we're talking about the engine. So they put in a turbo 1.8.
Yep.
Made good power. I think it was 178 horsepower. Yeah. So it was the most powerful Miata ever at the time. Even had more powerful than the NC, which I owned a little bit later.
Right.
But it was like the peakiest power delivery. It just was not a fun car to drive for that reason. And so, fortunately, we have the aftermarket again, much like the BRZ came to the rescue of Mazda. Flying Miata came out with a little enchilada kit, give you an intake, a downpipe, an exhaust, and a tune, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what fixed the power delivery on the car and made it something a little bit more peaceful to drive instead of something that was just like, very, very peaky and just un-Miata-like, right? Like it didn't really fit the ethos of the car.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that, because I think a forced induction engine could be cool in a hot hatch, that type of thing. But when you're talking about a roadster, right? The whole point of a roadster is simplicity, lightness. We're talking about just connection to the engine, and nothing beats a naturally aspirated engine for that.
And so it had massive lag.
Yeah.
And so just those two things, the peaky delivery, the lag, just ruined the Miata experience in the NB Mazda Speed. And so again, great idea, just not a great execution.
And that's why they stayed away from them.
Well, that you could actually get a screaming deal on these when they were on the loss because they couldn't sell them.
Yeah.
One, they were a lot more expensive than your regular NB, and your regular NB was more fun to drive. I mean,
That is a great point. That is a great point. I forgot all about that little car, actually, until you brought it up. When I was shopping for Miatas, they came up, but
yeah, I mean, fixed with a little, little enchilada kit from Flying Miata, and so that rectifies it for I think about $2,000, and so it's not bad, but you shouldn't have to do that.
No, definitely not, especially from a company like Mazda.
Right. Yeah.
It's all about driving excitement. Right?
Driving excitement, baby. And
vroom, vroom. True. They're twins. Yeah. In a sense. Well, that was a depressing list. What could have been, right? What could have been?
Join us in therapy.
Well, what cars did we miss? What car do you think should have had a better engine?
That's right. I'm sure we missed some on our list because we're not that comprehensive when we do it, but we got 8 good cars that are on here, I think.
So. All deserving.
Yes, very deserving.
Well, Greg disagrees with one of mine, but that's okay.
I mean, it's slightly deserving.
Slightly deserving.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed us chatting about these terribly engined cars.
That's right. Thank you so much for watching.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on The Driver's Line.
If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss a thing.